Hey, this is Sam Black with my first match with this red-blue Legacy Cube deck, and I'm on the play with a hand that's a little slow but totally fine. If I draw a second red by turn 3, it's not even particularly slow. Shelldeck Isle finds Thing in the Ice and Hordling Outburst, and I don't think Thing in the Ice is a good late game play, so I'm going to take the Hordling Outburst. Draw a Muldrifter. I'm planning to not sack the Scalding Tarn because I want to draw a Mountain. Goblin Rabblemaster is probably even better. Play Rabblemaster, make a Goblin attack. My opponent is going to kill my Rabblemaster, making a token of their own, and attack me. Now, really hoping to draw a Mountain so I can Chandra the Young Pyromancer. But that doesn't work out, so I'll just play the Archmage and just pass the turn here. Trading doesn't accomplish much, it just lets my opponent attack with the Young Pyromancer. And here my opponent played Mimic Vat, which is really bad for me. I really don't want my opponent to get Glenn under Archmage under the Mimic Vat, and it also makes evoking the Muldrifter terrible. Whirler Rogue is another huge liability against Mimic Vat. So I'm going to play it a little conservatively here and just play the Thing in the Ice. Likely wrong. Probably should have played the Whirler Rogue since my opponent can kill my Glenn Archmage anyway. But it ends up working out very well for me because my opponent uses Stoke the Flames on my Glenland Archmage, planning to get it under Mimic Vat, but unfortunately for my opponent, both their ability and my ability trigger when my creature dies, and their ability goes on the stack first as the active player. So Persist is going to resolve first, and I'm going to get my Glenland Archmage, and it will not go under the Mimic Vat. So my opponent needed to wait until my turn to make that play. And I'm going to draw a Grimlavamancer and get a little attack in here. And now I'll play the Whirler Rogue. And my opponent is just going to cast Primeval Titan. So now it's pretty clear that I just need to race. I've drawn my 5th land, so I'm just going to cast Muldrifter here. I could play the Chandra's Phoenix for more damage this turn, but I think I'm going to need more cards to win. And as it happens, I draw 6 points of burn, which is probably literally perfect. So now my opponent needs to do something to stay alive, and instead my opponent plays another threat. I make a really bad block here because I forget that Omnath triggers on Young Pyromancer's elemental tokens. I should not block there. So now my opponent gets the Omnath bolt, but luckily for me fires it at Whirler Rogue, which will kill it and put it under the Mimic Vat, but my opponent doesn't have enough. Oh no, Moto's bad at showing new things that go under cards. But my opponent doesn't have enough mana to use Mimic Vat, and I can attack for 5 in the air, and then I have 6 points of burn to finish it off. So that's game 1. For game 2, I'm on the draw, and I have a pretty good hand. Scalding Tarn and pass. My opponent's going to accelerate with Nature's Lore. I'm going to ice my opponent's land. My opponent plays Ratchet Bomb. I'm just going to play Rebel Master. Attack with a Goblin. My opponent stoke the flames to my Rebel Master. So now I get to play Chandra and plus Chandra. And my opponent plays Hangerback Walker for 3. So I activated Chandra first, which I like. I could have plussed to get through the Hangerback Walker, but given that my hand doesn't really have a lot to deploy to the board here, I think it's worth just drawing a card and seeing if I can get some more pressure going. I could ponder first to try to set up what Chandra is doing, but I think it's better to just start by drawing a card so that I have the option to cast a 5-mana spell if I hit it. And I hit Incinerate, which is not great. I could use it on the Hangerback Walker, or I could target my opponent. And if I use it on the Hangerback Walker, my opponent gets 3 Thopters to start attacking Chandra, whereas if it's the Hangerback Walker, it's not really a great attacker because of the Goblin to block. Decided to try to ignore the Hangerback Walker and just burn my opponent out from here. Given how last game ended, that feels like it could be what the game is about. This was tricky. It was Chandra's Phoenix, Lightning Bolt, Glenland, Archmage, and Mountain. I think all 3 of the spells are reasonable depending on what I expect the game to look like. Well, next turn I'm going to be able to use one, so but it's just about what I think I'm going to need. And Lightning Bolt is the most aggressive, Glenland Archmage is the most grindy. I decided to split the difference and go for the Phoenix. Don't know if it's right. Thought this was a really hard decision. And I'm going to pass, and my opponent plays Eldrazi Monument, which I could counter, but so I have Izzet Charm that I'm going to cast this turn. I could counter the Eldrazi Monument, or I could just draw 2 and discard 2 to try to find more burn. And I decided that the Eldrazi Monument is pretty slow when my opponent only has 1 creature, and I'd rather try to just ignore it and win around it by drawing into burn spells. So I cast Izzet Charm. My opponent attacks Chandra for 4, so I'm just going to let Chandra take it. Cast Izzet Charm to draw. Find some pretty good cards. Plus Chandra, find Whirler Rogue, which seems worth casting. But I should have attacked before playing Whirler Rogue. I actually completely forgot about my opponent's Ratchet Bomb at this point. So I play Whirler Rogue, and now when I attack, my opponent blows up my Goblin. Ponder and find 3 spells, which I keep, but don't think enough about the order, I think, given my Bedlam Reveler. And I'm just going to Chain Lightning my opponent here. So they're at 10, and I have 5 points of burn. Plus 1 from Chandra is 6 points of burn, so that puts them down to 4. They can't kill Chandra this turn because Hangerback Walker is going to be breaking, which means that it will have the tokens will have Summoning Sickness. So my opponent charges to get a 4th token, and then plays Devoted Druid. And now attacking is not really on the table. I draw Opposition, and my opponent has a lot more creatures than I do, so I decide that I'm not really that concerned with the opposition. I'm just gonna start burning my opponent with Electrolyze. And then I plus Chandra to try to find a mountain and hit, so I can cast Lightning Strike and Bedlam Reveler. But I think this whole line of trying to Bedlam Reveler this turn might have been wrong. It's possible that I'm supposed to just Lightning Strike an opposition and trust that opposition will be good later. Discarding 2 cards to play Bedlam Reveler is pretty bad. Especially since attacking on the ground isn't really viable, so I'm just discarding 2 to draw 3. The Reveler being in play doesn't really do anything. So then I can't attack. My opponent sacks a Thopter, kills Chandra, and hits me for 2. And then plays Wormcoil Engine. And this is about the worst I can get punished for discarding opposition. Had I cast opposition last turn, I think I'm probably in good shape to win this game by just, well, as it turns out, my next cards gave me a lot of creatures for opposition, which would have let me win very easily. But even if that didn't happen, just opposition to stop Wormcoil Engine would probably give me plenty of time to find a way to burn my opponent out or develop a large enough board to tap my opponent's blockers and attack through opposition while my opponent's sacrificing 1 creature turned to Eldrazi Monument. However, having played the way that I did and not having accounted for the fact that my opponent could play a creature that gains a ton of life, I have no way to stop the Wormcoil Engine from connecting here and putting my opponent up to 12. And then I can't really recover from there, given that it's really hard to get through. Oh, and my opponent cores for Siege Gangs, and now they have plenty of blockers. And I still haven't had a window to cast this Chandra's Phoenix, which doesn't accomplish much now, and never had a window to get through. So, I think I navigated a narrow window to lose this game. I think, well, I'm not sure if countering the Eldrazi Monument would have worked out better or not, but certainly discarding the opposition was horrible. And then in the third game, I'm on the play again. And this hand has a lot of double red cards and no mountain, so I'm going to mulligan. And I don't really think that I want 5 lands and a Hordling Outburst, so I'm going to mulligan again. And I'm mulliganing into a pretty good 5. And put Chain Lightning on the bottom because I just want to find lands to cast my spells. Play Lavamancer, attack, play Young Pyromancer. My opponent plays Duskwatch, and I'm going to play Hordling Outburst and then offer to trade, which my opponent will accept. Now I have 2 cards in the graveyard, so I can kill the Devoted Druid with my Lavamancer. And that's gonna let me attack for 4. Play the Shelldock Isle, hitting Chandra's Phoenix again. My opponent plays Pia and Kieran, which is a pretty good way to stabilize a board. I draw a Lightning Strike to get rid of the 2/2 so that I can attack with my tokens. I decide to attack with the Lavamancer also, since I only have 1 card in the graveyard and I want to push damage because I don't have anything else going on. My opponent doesn't do anything, so I get to attack for another 3 here. And then my opponent uses Stoke the Flames on a token when I don't play anything else. and then plays Mog War Marshal to stabilize. I draw Krenko's Command, which will theoretically let me push through at some point. Decide not to attack into the War Marshal, which just gives my opponent a block without needing to pay Echo, so it basically pays Echo for them, kind of. My opponent doesn't play Echo, but does play Siege Gang Commander to go wider than me. And I don't draw anything. And then my opponent plays Keranos, and I draw opposition, but Siege Gang Commander and Keranos can easily handle all of my creatures so that I can't usefully lock my opponent down with opposition. So here I'm trying to tap my opponent's mana, my opponent's using it in response to kill my stuff, and my opponent clears my board here by using the mana in their upkeep. See Wormcoil Engine, and that's the end of me.